Toledo. Please have a seat and turn to page 2 in your liturgy books. Nikaya 3 Refuges. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. I take refuge in Sangha. 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature of change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My deeds are my closest companions. I am the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. This precious human life, rarely encountered, is easily lost. Now that I have life and opportunity, may I practice the Dharma wholeheartedly. Mahayana Refuge. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way. In my heart, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. May I liberate suffering beings and bring them to great joy. May the compassionate spirit of love grow within me, that I may actualize the great way. Invocation of the lineage. I give thanks for the guidance of my teachers, for the lineage of teachers before them. I give thanks and offerings for their devoted practice of generosity, moral discipline, patience, joyful effort, concentration, wisdom, skillful means, unshakable vow, spiritual powers, and awakened awareness for my benefit. May their years of life be lengthened, may their vows be completely realized, and may I cultivate these perfections with their guidance. 7 practices of the Bodhisattva. I bow down in body, speech, and mind. I offer the best I have to give, both real and imagined, to fill the space between us. I regret and purify all transgressions. I rejoice in all virtues. I request you to remain until total enlightenment. I request wise and compassionate guidance. I dedicate my merit for the sake of all beings. Generating love and compassion. May all sentient beings be free from clinging and hatred, being close to some and distant from others. How wonderful it would be. May this be accomplished. I will free them from clinging and hatred. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. 'Happiness. 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 ' I will bring them happiness and the causes of happiness. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How wonderful it would be. May this be accomplished. I will free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. Bless me to accomplish this. May all sentient beings have a joy that has never known suffering. May they be free from clinging, hatred, jealousy, miserliness, doubt, pride, wrong view, ignorance, and dualistic thoughts. How wonderful it would be. May this be accomplished. I will bring them to this state. Bless me to accomplish this. Please stand for the Heart Sutra on page 4 of your liturgy book. Great Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, practicing deep Prajna Paramita, clearly saw that all five skandhas are empty, transforming all suffering and distress. Shariputra form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is exactly emptiness, emptiness exactly form. Sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all things are essentially empty, not born, not destroyed, not stained, not pure, without loss, without gain. Therefore in emptiness there is no form, no sensation, perception, mental reaction, consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, object of thought, no seeing, and so on, to no thinking, no ignorance, and also no ending of ignorance, and so on, to no old age and death, and also no ending of old age and death, no suffering, cause of suffering, cessation, path, no wisdom, and no attainment, since there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva lives by Prajna Paramita, with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, and therefore no fear bliss, nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future live by Prajnaparamita, attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore know that Prajnaparamita is a great sacred mantra, a great vivid mantra, the unsurpassed mantra, the supreme mantra, which completely removes all suffering. This is truth, not mere formality. Therefore set forth the Prajnaparamita mantra. Set forth this mantra and proclaim Gate Gate Para, Gate Parsam, Gate Bodhisvaha, Gate Gate Para, Gate Parsam, Gate Bodhisvaha, Gate Gate Para, Gate Parsam, Gate Bodhisvaha. Infinite realms of light and dark convey the Buddha mind. All that is and we ourselves come forth in perfect harmony. We offer this sincere and devoted practice for the many beings of the 6 worlds and dedicate it in grateful thanks to the strength and sound practice of the great Heartland Sangha and its teachers. May our virtuous actions be clear from all interferences, and may our vows be fully realized. We especially dedicate these merits to Jackie, Roger, Mike, Debbie, Joe, Sandra, Emma, Hazel, Soke, Daitoku, Adele, Eka, and Dave for safe travels, and the aforementioned for peace and healing. Also Jessica, Donna, Mike, Kisan, Jane, and Angie at the time of their death. We especially dedicate these merits to all those suffering from cruelty, calamity, injustice, and war, as well as those whose names we hold in the silence of our hearts, and those whose names we now voice aloud. May we live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma, and may we realize the Buddha way together. All Buddhas throughout space and time. All honored ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom. Again, thank you for being here today at the Buddhist Temple of Toledo, especially if you are a father, have a father, or know any dad jokes. At this time, if you are a child and would like to go to Dharma school, that will be starting in a moment, as well as Dharma school teachers. Everyone else, please prepare for Zazen. Please stand for Kinley. At the sound of the clappers, first and third rows from the center will turn to their right. Second and fourth will turn to their left. Follow the person in front of you. We will now recite the Sign of Covenant, which can be found on page 8 of the liturgy books. We, the Daishin Kokuji Sangha, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the wisdom and compassion we seek to cultivate by practice, and with deep gratitude for the teachers of this lineage and our connection to one another, covenant to support each other by upholding the precepts of doing no harm, practicing good, and actualizing good for others. Please be seated for this morning's talk. Please sit comfortably and so that you can see the speakers today. Also in your liturgy books on page 8, we'll be doing the Gatha on opening the sutra. Gatha on opening the sutra.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kensei. As you know, we have a really strong cohort of Jukai initiates this year, working on taking the precepts and writing their vows. And the teachers have asked some of us who've been practicing with the Jukai precepts for a while to share our experience and to, just talk about what it's been like to work with the precepts, to practice that. Last week we heard from Soan and Jukai, some beautiful sharing. And today Reverend Shokai and I are going to share our experience. So I came to the temple in 2017 for the first time. I was very, very sick. I had a very life-threatening illness. I came into the temple with oxygen in my nose and a central line in my chest, and I was really prone to fainting because I had heart failure and I couldn't breathe. At I don't even really know why I came into the temple. I was just looking for, I think, I came because Kokai wanted to come. But I stayed, and I kept coming back. Because, when I first came in, it was really clear that there was something really resonant and something in real alignment with something that I was needing, some like real stability, right? So, we kept coming. But I was like super sick. I mean, like I actually couldn't always sit up to do zazen, kind of sick, right? So like taking the precepts, like doing the Jukai process, just really wasn't an option for me then. It was different then too. Instead of meeting weekly like we all do now, it was a week-long retreat, and there was no way that I could go for a week and write all these vows. I couldn't even sit up to do zazen, right? So it wasn't an option for me. It just wasn't accessible. And like at that time, that was true of so many things for me because I was so sick. I didn't have a career anymore. I didn't have hobbies. It was hard for me to even be a mother and to take care of my kids. So the idea, and I wanted to do this Jukai process so badly. Like some of you who knew me then, like it was just like right the day I walked into the temple was like my heart called me to do this, and it just was impossible. So it was very painful in a way. And then I don't know, it was probably only a few months after being there, and we were starting to talk about the Jukai formation starting in this summer, and I just decided I was going to do that by myself and like take those precepts seriously and start practicing them in the only way that I could, which was, not on my own because I was part of the Sangha, but I wasn't able to do it formally and officially. So I just, got some books and I memorized the precepts and meditated on them. And I just related to them in the way that I could at that time. And I listened to the podcasts, and I came to service, and I heard talks, and, had some really beautiful friendships start to form, and I did what I could, basically. I didn't even know what some of them meant, like what's a Dharma asset? How would I not spare that? I don't even know what that means. I mean, I do a little bit now, but I really didn't at the time at all. But I definitely had this trust in the precepts even then. You know how like when you come in and you hear the liturgy and like it doesn't make much sense at first, but like maybe there's something there that like is so true and correct, so you just go with it, right? And that's how the precepts felt for me. Like, I mean, some of them, or you could even argue, like, don't kill, sure, yeah, I like that. But some of them, the more obscure ones to me, were, I just trusted that they meant something more that I didn't know or didn't understand, and I just let them kind of be there, right? So it's like liturgy that way. Like, I don't understand every word of it, and that's okay. Like, I can just practice with that. So I looked through some of my old journals to get ready for today, and it seems like the precept that I practiced with the most before I took Jukai was the fourth grave precept about not lying. Not because I lied all the time. Formally, like no, I didn't have a problem like telling lies. But when I read that the opposite of that, or the inverse of that, is to manifest truth, and I remember I wrote down in my journal, like, do not express falsely in an effort to protect the self. And that is so much more than just not telling lies out loud, right? Like, what does that mean to manifest truth? Especially when you're dying, right? And people don't like it when you're manifesting truth in that way. And I was working really hard to protect people, to protect myself, to protect myself, my identity, because it was crumbling with everything that I had lost. So what does it mean to manifest truth and not try to protect that self, and not try to protect your family and your friends and your mother from the truth? It's really tiring, right? It's exhausting. And my mind was very boggled then. Around the time I came to the temple, I think one reason I had so much resonance with the precepts was I needed some kind of structure something to structure my spirituality around and with, if that makes sense, because I just felt like everything was disintegrating and falling apart. And I felt like the precepts, they were like a tether. You know, they were a real grounding for me right from the beginning. I remember another thing I practiced early on. We used to do this all the time. I don't think we do it anymore, but we should maybe put it on the calendar. I could make it happen. We used to, on the full moon as a Sangha, reaffirm our vows, our precepts. And there would be a post on Facebook that it was the full moon and people were going to do this. And I didn't have a Roxu or anything. I hadn't done the Jukai process, but I just went out on my deck by myself with my oxygen in my nose and under the moon. We had a little deck. You have a little deck. It overlooks that big tree, right? That big sycamore tree. And I used to just stand out there and recite those vows and renew my personal commitment to them. And sometimes I still do that. I mean, it's hard because we don't have the Facebook reminder and it's not on the calendar, but I kind of miss it as a regular thing. And so for me, that was one way I could really, it felt like I was taking refuge in Sangha because I couldn't do a lot of the things that would concretely feel that way. But this felt really concrete to me because everybody was doing it on their own, in their own spaces. And so I thought it was really connecting for me. And then, things got a little different. We had a pandemic. And I was, by then, super sick and at the end stages of my disease. And they closed down the transplant list. Do you have something so on? Oh, okay. They closed the transplant list, and it seemed like I was going to need to prepare to die that summer. And honestly, I was still really sad. I was sad about a lot of things. I was actually really sad that I hadn't done Jukai, and that I hadn't been able to do those public vows and to, become formally Buddhist and take refuge. But then, you know what? I got a transplant. I did. And so this quite an astounding miracle, really. Absolutely nobody was expecting that to happen. And, so they cut you open and they do the thing. And then I had heart failure, so I had to be sedated for, I think, 5 or 6 days. And then I was alone, a lot of it because it was the pandemic. So they pulled the breathing tube out. And I've talked to a lot of people who've had transplants now, and everybody universally says, as soon as they pull the tube out, everybody says, I can breathe. You take this breath, and you just instinctively say, I can breathe. It's amazing. And then I said, and now I can take Jukai. And I'm sure everybody in the ICU says gibberish things. I think everybody in the room just gibberish that. But I remember being really clear that I can breathe, I had this second chance, and I can formally do what I've been doing for these last few years. And then I did because I could. And in 2022, we had a Zoom cohort where we practiced. It was the first time, I think, that we practiced practicing the precepts, writing the vows once a week. We met on Zoom and we shared them that way. And that was it was a very powerful process. And when we had the empowerment ceremony that you all will have in August, and you receive your Roxu and you make these vows, I think the whole process, even though I'd been practicing with it for several years, it was still very transformative. It was still very, it just made it a little more live for me, I think. It sparked something that was a little more alive. That's the only word I have for it. So then I remember in 2022, a lot of like crazy things happened in my family because that wasn't enough, right? That was not enough. The IRS had to get involved. Which had nothing to do with the fourth grade precept, by the way. It was just an error that a lot of people had from using QuickBooks or whatever that thing is. What is it? TurboTax. But not only that, so the IRS actually did get involved. This isn't funny. This was actually really terrible. Our daughter was, she was in a psychiatric hospital that was like 4 hours away. We were kind of coming out of the pandemic, remember, and everybody was taking their masks off, and I had these precious little lungs that I was just like feeling so vulnerable about. And I was just in this total tailspin of crisis. We come to morning practice, and I was, Kinko found me outside sobbing. And she was like, why don't you just go in and see if a teacher is in there? Just talk to somebody. So I came in and I ended up, Rinson made this fantastic analogy for me about a horse stall. Like it's pretty full of manure. Manure was the word he used for sure. And he was talking about how if you're dealing with this horse stall full of manure, like the first thing, right, is like don't manure in it yourself. Don't add to this. And then maybe you can start to clean it up a little bit and muck it out a little. And you know, this was such a great analogy for just this. I mean, obviously it's an analogy for the first pure precepts, do no harm, practice good, and actualize good. And it was such a reminder that like we have these precepts always, like you can always come back to them, right? No matter what else is happening, the crisis and the IRS and all the wild things that are happening, you just can come back into those precepts. So, you know, I think that particular moment for me was kind of realizing that like when you're practicing regularly, that stuff shows up in a crisis. It shows up for you. And when you practice it through the crisis, it's so powerful then in every day. So it's just this sort of beautiful synergy of those two things. That was kind of a turning point in how I worked with that, I think. So now I've been here for 7 years, practicing with the precepts. You know, I think as you integrate them more and more into your life, it sort of starts to feel more like an orientation, like an operating system. Like maybe I'm not always like going through the 10 grave precepts and like checking something. Sometimes you do, right? Something comes up and you're like, is this causing harm? You actually go directly to the question. But other times it's just like you're not really analyzing it at all. It's just that's part of your orientation now. So I think there's just tremendous power in practicing regularly with all 16 of the precepts. And that's exactly what happens here, right? Like in leadership in the temple, I mean, all the decisions are based on those precepts. It's an ethical grounding. So, I mean, our teachers model it beautifully, and the Sangha models it, and I feel really lucky that I get to engage it every day right here in such an alive way. And then that's all true, and it's still like every day is always still like it's ongoing practice, right? Like last week I went on a road trip to see my other kids and to have some time by myself, and I don't go out a lot anymore, y'all. Like I'm here a lot, so it's kind of mean out there sometimes. I mean, it really is. And I was sort of noticing that from time to time, and you know that the precept about not praising the self and abusing others came up for me. Like I'm like out here and I'm like noticing all this stuff and like, is this like actually making me feel a little better about myself? Like and it kind of was. Like it actually kind of was. And so, you know, you can notice that, and then you can practice with that. And Doan gives those teachings about the 4 R's: to recognize, regret, repeat not, and redirect. And I go to that. I think that's a huge part of my practice with the precepts. It's not so hard sometimes to recognize it, but for me, it's harder to actually really feel the regret, because I think that's the important part. It's all important, but that's the part for me that's a little stickier. So it's the important part for me to really practice, to feel that regret without feeling guilty. But you can't really do the second part unless you actually do the regret. So I'm really grateful for those teachings. I'm really grateful that that's part of the practice with the precepts. And then I think the last thing I want to say is that another important part of my precepts practice has been working with the Jukai book, the transcripts. I was really lucky to be able to be part of the editing of that book that you all use for the one from the teachers. And that was very powerful practice to hear it, to listen again, and to the talks, and to transcribe them and edit them. And there's this one little passage out of there that I took out, and I edited it a little bit more to make it a little shorter, but I keep it in my Raksu bag, and I refer to it pretty frequently. So I'm just going to end by reading that. This is from Rinzin. It's about the 8th grade precept, not sparing the Dharma assets. From the beginning, there has been no stinginess at all. The universe itself is pulsing with radiant gifts. There is nothing but compassion expressing constantly. Where the mind is stuck and suffering collects, it's because we're being stingy, holding on to making a fixed thing. So give the self to the self, the universe to the universe, the cloud to the cloud. Even the sky has to be given away. Using all the ingredients of your life, let that truth sing out as your precious human life.
How about now? Okay. Yes, I did the precepts with the first class back in 2010, but I still cannot work the mic. So that certainly says something about me. So first, I'd like to say what a pleasure it is to share the high seat with our new Shuso. Who is, the Shuso is the model of practice, and here is the model of sincere practice and the fruits of practice. And it's going to be a great fall on Go. So how has my practice of the precepts evolved over time? I'm not sure evolved is even the right word. So the first class here was 2010, and we did all of the formation at Lourdes College, at the Catholic University in Sylvania, which brought up all of my Catholic angst right there. You walk in and there's the crucifix right there on the wall facing you. So there was a lot of, and also we were very young in the Sangha. This was the first formation. We've played with many different ways of doing this training. So Kaishin and I have always been in the guinea pig class, which makes it scary and really exciting and energetic. So the first thing I would say is that I came to the precepts with a very idealized intellectual understanding of what I was doing. And I hope if anything has evolved, it's that I now see it in much more practical and integrated terms. We had formation class this morning. It is abundantly clear that nobody in that class is under the illusion that this is an external code of conduct. It is not anything as simple as that. And really back in 2010, I would have said, I know that. I know it's not an external code. And I knew it intellectually. I could have defended that position, no problem. But now that I look back, it's I didn't actually know that. I didn't have the felt sense of that. I didn't know it in my bones. And that integration takes time. It takes as long as it takes. You know, they say the garden doesn't grow the garden. We don't have that kind of control. As a gardener, we cultivate the soil and we pull the weeds and we do what we can, but we don't grow the garden. The process of integration is organic, and you just have to give it space and time and trust. And of course, it's an embodied integration. It's not an intellectual integration. And we do it right here in the mud of our lives, and we don't do it anywhere else. Right here with all of the crises that are arising. Bernie Glassman, Roshi, kind of expresses this integration. He said that the precepts are actually expressions of our Buddha nature, expressions of our being. So he says, like, why would my right hand steal from my left hand? It just makes no sense. It's all one. If my left hand was on fire, why would my right hand not put out the flames? It's that integrated, that the precepts, they're not a code of conduct, they're actually the expression of your Buddha nature. As you go through the mandala in the temple, you will take the precepts over and over and over again. Ordination, you take the precepts. The last koans in the 2,000 koan curriculum, or however many, are the precepts. So you will be encountering them over and over again, because you're actually encountering your true nature. You're encountering the nature of reality. This is alignment with reality. And they are a map. I probably would have frowned upon that way back then, that this was something esoteric and exotic and philosophical. But actually, they're a map. And maps are really, really useful. So we have the 3 pure precepts: do no harm, practice good, save all beings, or actualize good for others, which are the cardinal points. These are always the guiding principles. When in doubt, 3 pure precepts. Then we have the grave precepts, which are the roads on the map with all of the obstacles and the breakdowns and the traffic jams and all of that. And then there's refuge. But refuge in the 3 treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, is actually the terrain. It's actually the ground that you're walking on. And I think the word refuge, for the linguistics here, I think it actually means to throw oneself into. And that's actually what we do with the refuges. We vow to fully embody and express our Buddha nature, and it's no less than that. So it's not an ideal, it's an actual embodiment. The sky's blue, the grass is green, all of my mistakes are it too. Not clinging to, not rejecting anything, everything perfect and complete, even in the midst of the suffering of this world. So thorough reliance on our awakened nature, on Buddha, thorough reliance on this ocean of wisdom and compassion, this diversity, Dharma, and thorough reliance on the interconnection of all beings, Sangha. So what did this all mean for me, like on the ground over these years? Well, coming back to the answers are not outside myself. That is a major thing. I grew up in Catholic Ireland, where you were told, under no circumstances ever trust yourself. You trust what the priests tell you, what all the authority figures, which were like 99% male, tell you, what the patriarchy tells you. You never actually trust yourself. You never listen to your intuition. So this was a major turning around for me, to be told, this is your experience. This is valuing your experience. And actually, you can't do that unless you encounter it in this intimate way. Another major thing for me, I'm someone who likes lists, and I like to check off the things I've done. But really, the precepts are giving up any hope of certainty. There actually are no rules. There's no right way to fold a napkin, unfortunately. There's nothing to grasp onto. Everything is groundless. And this is what you have the courage to throw yourself into, this groundlessness. It's a commitment to absolute freedom. And it's messy, and it's painful, and there are edges, and it's intimate. And this is the real work of awakening. This is not separate from the path of self-realization. It is the path of self-realization. So we commit to fully engage our life and to awaken within this life, nowhere else, this body, this life. Another realization for me over the years was you can't do this by yourself, and no one can do it for you. I think for a lot of us who came to the practice with the illusion of control, that you need to give up. That we don't control any of this. We have the teachers, we have the lineage, we have the Sangha. So in this vast space of groundlessness, we're held with this love and compassion. I know when I was doing Shuso training, the teachers respond in the moment to how your personality arises, how your karma arises. And Roshi at one stage was really strict with me, really firm with me. And I kind of called him on it, and he said, I wish somebody had cared about my practice enough to engage me like that. And I am deeply grateful for all of the edges that my teachers have kind of pushed me onto and pushed me off. It's really rare in a spiritual practice to have this kind of training, which is completely personal and completely non-personal. But you actually have to engage it with intimacy and with a sincere heart. And another thing, which is it's not one and done. Buddhas practice endlessly, as Dogen says, because character and virtue. You meet this moment and this moment and this moment, and it's an endless process. So, and that is not a moral failing, that, I have now reached the pinnacle and I can relax. No, you keep going, you keep engaging your life. But I think probably the biggest evolution, I don't like that word, but the biggest factor on the path for me has been letting go of the judging mind. I feel my problem is not so much the clinging and the aversion, it's the judgment, which is intrinsic to that. All of my mistakes, letting go of the outcome of everything, all of the mess of my life is not separate from my realization. And as Roshi says, all of our karma has to play out, whether you just walked in the door this morning and did beginning instruction, or whether you're an enlightened Zen master, all of your karma has to play out. It doesn't just go away because you get certain empowerments. And the question is, how do I engage that karma? And that is very much the question with the precepts. This is your personal karma meeting the void. How does that play out? And we can engage it, and I have in the past engaged it with the mind of judgment, with the mind of self-condemnation, with the mind of not good enough, not worthy of this path. There's a Vipassana teacher, Tara Brach. I don't know if probably the psychologists know her. And she talks about the trance of unworthiness, which I think is a great term, particularly in Western culture, that we do seem to be stuck in this trance of, I'm not good enough, this trance of self-judgment. And that's embedded in our beliefs, our thoughts, our bodies. But of course, with practice, with the first practice you do with Zazen, you're coming to the realization that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my beliefs, I'm not my body, I'm nothing solid. Any of the stories I tell myself or about others are simply that. They're just stories. But I think there's a danger in saying that we're minimizing our suffering. Those thoughts and feelings and emotions of not good enough are real. I mean, just talking about it, I can feel that clench in my body, that self-judgment. But things can be real and not true. And those stories you tell yourself are real in that those emotions are real. You really do feel them. But actually, they're not the truth. They're not the truth of who you are. They're just stories. And in our basic practice in Zazen, what do? We see through the stories. We just sit with reality. So that in our everyday life, when the feeling of, how could I screw up like that arises, it's like, well, that's just the way that played out. You treat people with love and compassion, and you realize, I'm not my screw-ups, I'm not my mistakes, I'm not my beliefs about myself. I simply, this activity of the universe responding as skillfully as I can. So we work with equanimity, our basic process of sitting in silence, because you have to have that base. You have to have that base of equanimity, or every belief and every emotion and every feeling is going to bowl you over. So you have to develop the roots of equanimity. We work with the precepts, with the moral and ethical teachings, with the expression of reality. And we work with the paramitas, the virtues. How do we live the bodhisattva life? Again, another map: generosity, moral discipline, precepts, and so on. And we develop enough space that we can actually hold our karma, see it for what it is. It's not us. How do we engage it? And it's not moral failure. It's simply engaging reality with compassion and wisdom. So on the other side of that, we no longer have the excuse of, I'm a terrible person and I can't possibly do this, because that is not true. You are perfect and complete, lacking nothing. And yes, we can all use a lot of work. That is also true. Buddhas practice endlessly. And now we have the freedom to actually do that work, to not constrain ourselves. I always go back to that Marianne Williamson quote where she says, it's not our failure or our smallness that scares us. It's our luminosity and our brilliance that scares us. So the precepts are the invitation to embrace that luminosity, embrace that vastness, and embrace it in the mud of our life, and in our failures, and in all of the messiness of everything we do. I know one of the books that you are studying is The Heart of Being, Daido Lari Roshi, and there's a quote in there: to truly realize the precepts is in itself to realize your true nature. To truly realize the precepts is in itself to realize your true nature. So great freedom and great responsibility. And deep bows to this year's Jukai class, who are doing amazing work and are an inspiration to all of us. And may we all come to complete and full awakening in this lifetime. Maybe so.
The Bodhisattva vows can be found on page 8 of the liturgy book. We will recite them now. Beings of Thank you all.